English translation. 619th Contact Thursday, the 2nd of April 2015, 10:47 hours.
Greetings and welcome, Ta, dear friend. You are in a hurry to come here because I thought that you would not come until the afternoon, after Florina had informed me of your arrival half an hour ago.
Yes, I was urged to visit you because somehow...
Did you think there was anything important going on?
Sort of, yes.
But there's really nothing to do, because everything is fine. Except that on the penultimate Saturday at 23:30 hours, I clumsily battered my ribs with bruises and bruises. But now everything is in good shape again, so you don't have to fix me up.
So something happened after all, which I was probably worried about. Then let me see.
Not necessary, my friend, because now everything is really starting again well. The inflammations swell and the whole thing is now bearable.
If that is the case, but let me see anyway. Yes, it must have been bad, and the inflammation is still present, but in decongestation, as you say.
It really was, Ta, but let it go because it's bearable now. And the rest of the inflammation goes away.
Then I don't want to rush you.
Well, and thank you. Then I turn on the computer now, because I want to come back to the reader's questions, and my question as well as to your answer at the 618th official contact conversation on the 21st of March, as well as to various earlier private conversations regarding your research regarding the psychopaths who are up to their nastiness in Earth's population, the private and state economy, and in the political offices. I have answered the whole thing in the following way, for which I would like to know if the following answer is correct, which I have given in memory according to your and Quetzal's earlier explanations. Please correct me if I have not correctly reproduced something from my memory.
Answer, according to Playaran, data various private talks and 618th official contact meeting on the 21st of March of 2015. The data given in the interview do not correspond to the research of the Playaran, and to a very large extent not. The Playaran explain that earthly psychologists and psychiatrists are not yet able to effectively recognize all psychopaths, who are also narcissists because narcissism is usually accompanied by psychopathy. Earthly psychological psychiatric sciences are still extremely deficient. Consequently, only a small part of all psychopaths can be recognized and correctly judged by psychologists and psychiatrists. Consequently, the majority of all psychopaths are not recognized. Also, not because earthly psychologists and psychiatrists let themselves be deceived by the psychopaths, and consequently their psychopathic forms are not recognized. This is also connected with the fact that psychopaths are, so to speak, perfect actors who are able to deceive every psychologist and psychiatrist with ease. According to Playaran research conducted in 2012, around 70–78% of all people in leading positions in governments, business and high politics worldwide are psychopaths, which means that on average 3/4 of all senior executives are psychopaths. Most of them, however, are able to conceal their psychopathic narcissistic forms from the environment, and thus also from so-called professionals, such as psychologists and psychiatrists, through their perfect acting ability. As a result, only a small part of the 70–78%, that is to say only their approx. 25% of the actual psychopathic narcissists are recognized in the leadership and power positions of governments, business, and political offices. And especially this percentage of psychopathic narcissists is willing under all circumstances to live out their leadership and power openly, and in any case, autocratically. Also with the approx. 27% psychopathic narcissists in the Earth's population, only a lower percentage are naturally recognized as such. Because also here their acting ability hides much and the psychopathy cannot be recognized openly. Consequently, only about 50% of the psychopaths are recognized as such.
Your execution is so far in order. But in terms of percentages of clearly identifiable psychopaths in governments, the private and public sectors, and political offices, you erroneously wrote 12, 15% instead of 22, 25%. This with regard to the effectively detectable psychopathic patients. This is the same as the percentage of psychopaths among Earth's population you have listed as 14-17 instead of 24-27%. You have also made a mistake with the statement of 5-7% of recognizable psychopaths in relation to the entire earthly population, because rightly it is about 57% of the 27% of the entire earthly population that have openly recognizable psychopathic narcissistic traits. This corresponds to about 12-15% of all persons clearly recognizable as psychopaths. That is to say, half of the 24-27%. The other half thus corresponds to those who know how to conceal their psychopathic narcissistic degeneration through their ability to act, etc., which can be called perfect. So now it is necessary to correct your incorrect data, what you should do immediately in your answer, so that everything is correct.
Probably my memory was clouded, or it was because I was affected by the pain of my accident when I called up and wrote down the conversation report. So I repeat, with regard to the clearly identifiable psychopathic narcissists, 22-25% of all 72-78% are in the governments as well as in the private and state economy and in the political offices. Thus, with 72-78% in approximately 3/4 all high-level personnel in governments, political offices and in the private and national economy are psychopathically narcissistic figures, whereby from these 3/4 of the total high-level personnel, thus 100%, in approximately 1/3 and or 22-25%, are clearly and distinctly recognizable as effective psychopath narcissists. Furthermore, 27% of the 100% of the world's population are psychopathically narcissistically affected, of which 57% or about half, that is to say about 15% are clearly recognizable psychopathic narcissists.
That is correct, and in other words, corresponds to what I have explained. And it may well be that you have committed yourself to the numbers when calling the conversation, because great pain can have an enormous negative effect on concentration.
Then it must really have been because I misspelled the numbers. But if I correct them now, then the damage can be repaired. If you want to give me the correct information again, I will use it in my answer right away.
Of course.
Then that's done too. Thank you, my friend. Then I would like to ask you what Zafanat Panayach said about earthly development in relation to computer and electronics, weapons development, and general engineering. You told me some time ago that he and Quetzal would be interested in how these things percentage in comparison between what is revealed and known to earthly population and what is hidden from humanity.
A large percentage of what results overall in all areas of computer and electronic technology, weapons technology, and general technology can be classified as secret. What the general public knows about the development of these factors amounts to only 35 to 45% of the total, while the remaining percentage of all development forms mentioned, that is to say, computer and electronics technology, weapons technology, and general technology, is kept secret. Computer, electronics, and weapons technology in particular are highly developed, with the USA leading all other countries in this respect.
I can imagine. But what about what happened with my computer that is largely fixed, therefore can't or hardly be hacked around in it anymore?
According to Quetzal and Zafanat Panayach, your computer is quite well protected against unprofessional attacks from outside, to which Stefan in particular has contributed a great deal, along with what Zafanat Panayach and Quetzal have done. Unfortunately, it is not possible to prevent the intervention and activities of specially trained specialists and their possibilities, as they exist in the state secret services. This is particularly because the computer and electronic technology accessible to the population is far below the effective level of development of the specialists in the secret services and computer industry. Consequently, this state is still so primitive that it is possible to break into computers through higher development possibilities and manipulate them by skilled state secret service personnel, as well as by certain private highly developed specialists, as may be possible by criminal organizations, sects, and private secret services. The computer and other electronic technologies available to the general public are therefore not the most modern and advanced, but only products that are still far behind the effective developments and can be controlled by secret services and highly trained hackers, etc., and influenced according to their will and ability. Thus, also documents existing in computers can be changed at will by external influences, as well as conversations conducted can be intercepted, whereby in these relationships there are no limits to the possibilities, and consequently everything related to this is constantly further developed.
I'm afraid there's nothing we can do about that. Well then, I have something here that you should read. It is an e-brief which was beamed to me by Elizabeth Gruber and which is addressed to the FIGU. It is a matter of the sect of the alleged UFO contact Raël, who wants to be in contact with so-called Elohim, and on whose behalf he is supposed to be ambassador or something on Earth. I'm sure you'll remember that I was sued by this Raël sect because I wrote something about the cult boss Claude Vorilhon that didn't fit into the sect members' stuff. The sect had created a symbol that represented a hexagram with a swastika, which was later replaced by a windmill. The Raël movement, also called Raëlism or Raëlist religion, was until 1976 also known as Madec Mouvement pour l'accueil des extraterrestres, Créateurs de l'Humanité, German, Bewegung für den Empfang der Außerirdischen, Schöpfer der Menschheit. The new religious movement was founded in 1973 by Claude Vorilhon alias Raël * 1946, who claims to have had an encounter with a representative of an extraterrestrial civilization who had stepped out of a UFO. The group became known for its desire to facilitate human cloning.
Original message subject. Form input from, contact form date, Friday, the 27th of March, 2015, 13:40 and 9 seconds plus 0100 CET. From Schluep Camille to info@figu. Org submitted on Friday, the 27th of March, 2015 13:40 from IP 83.76. 113.198. These values have been entered. First name and surname, Schluep C. Country, Switzerland. Telephone or fax, email address, preferred language, German.
Your message to us. Hello, we are Raël and want to build an embassy building where we can receive the Elohim. On the 4th of April, we have a press conference in Bern and a booth where we present the model. All governments on this earth are called upon to provide the alien land and give you diplomatic protection. Please send me your email address to send you an invitation. Also have a look at www.rael.org. User sincerely C. Sluice.
The whole matter is no more and no less than absolutely ridiculous, and it must show every rational human being on Earth the boundless nonsense spread by this sect.
The sect obviously does not consist of bright members because they do not think for themselves, because they are not capable of doing so they let their guru think and decide for them. I don't want to say more about this either, because it would carry water into the Rhine. But I wanted to show you how the Raël sect is still doing its stupid mischief. But people are also sold for being stupid in other ways, such as through alleged spiritual healing, Reiki, Bach flower therapy and homeopathy, etc. of which I can sing a song, because I have tried various such illusory healing methods over long periods of time and found out that they actually do not help anything. They help only when there is faith in their healing and power, namely in such a way that a signal effect is created through which the person imagines a healing process for himself, which then also does its effect, namely by causing a self-healing. But this is only the case if it is not time itself that inevitably brings about healing, because through the course of which suffering ebbs and dissolves. Also acupuncture I have endured more than 1 year over me, whereby also only a tiny success did not come off. Only when I went to my family doctor and told him what ailment, namely Helicobacter pylori, I probably carried around with me for 22 years and that he should examine my blood for it, did it turn out that I was cured by antibiotics. But now there are ghosts on television, in newspapers and magazines against stories in which it is claimed that from time to time the body has to be purified and detoxified in order to be really healthy. Your father Shvath, as well as your daughter Simyase, you yourself and Quetzal, said that this was complete nonsense, which my friend, family doctor Dr. Gross in Ooster, as well as my former family doctor Dr. Floxman confirmed, namely that the body does not under any circumstances prepare slags and therefore does not have to be purified. According to my family doctors and you, this also applies equally to alleged toxins in the body, which must be flushed out and washed out. That too is sheer nonsense, as are strict fasting cures.
From a purely medical and scientific point of view, no cinders can form in a human body that would have to be washed out in order to be healthy and well. What needs to be considered and understood is the fact that acidification of the body can take place. But this has nothing to do with slag deposition or poisoning of the body, which would result in it having to be purified or detoxified, as in an alleged washing out and rinsing out of the pollutants. If, for example, there is talk of intestinal cleansing or biliary cleansing, then this has nothing to do with a removal of slag or removal of toxins, but is only a washing out of parasites and gallstones. Effective purification would require slag based on combustion residue, which does not occur in the human body. Even supposedly toxic and harmful metabolic products do not have to be excreted explicitly from the body by special measures, because all the waste products that accumulate in the body are normally excreted automatically by the body itself, without the need for special help. Only when organic complaints occur may intervention be necessary in certain circumstances through medical measures or simple medication, for example in the case of constipation. Purification or detoxification of the body must be called nonsense of alternative medicine, which does not include methods such as cupping, enemas, sweating cures, and laxatives, which can be helpful for certain ailments. Also mercury, like for example in amalgam tooth fillings as well as vaccines, poisons or alleged cinders cannot be discharged from the body, as is claimed by alternative physicians and Kurt Fuchern. In general, the human body cannot be detoxified or purified therapeutically in the sense of alternative medicine, because where neither toxins nor waste products are produced, they cannot be washed out of the body, etc. If in the long run the chamfering cure is considered, then is to be said to it that by such even the pollutant load of the blood rises, because the entire cycle cannot work in the way, as this requires the physical necessity. If any healing successes with regard to illnesses and suffering appear through a fasting cure, then these are experienced purely subjectively, whereby they are clearly based only on a placebo effect, because the imagination pretends a healing.
Actually, the fundamental and decisive point or the ultimate point in the whole of the health of the human body, as in any other form of life, is metabolism. Because if it functions properly, then the immune system is also in order and the body is less susceptible to diseases and suffering of all kinds. Can you say something about that for once, please?
The immune system is the center of health, and this depends on a well-functioning metabolism. through which every single cell of the body is supplied with everything it needs and which very quickly removes all useless substances and toxins from the body. As a rule, when a healthy and not excessive intake of food is maintained, or when there are no unhealthy fat-building factors, the cells slowly but surely break down excess fats and leave behind a feeling of lightness. However, the metabolism can only function perfectly if it is provided with the right food and the necessary prerequisites are created. Basically, the metabolism must always be stimulated in the right way, because only then can it actually function in a healthy way. Everything that is eaten must be processed and crushed, just as it must be sorted into useful and unusable items. This is done on the one hand by preparing the food and on the other hand by chewing the food, which requires a good and healthy set of teeth as well as the necessary time to chew everything in a good way. The food must not be swallowed down, but must be processed with the teeth in the mouth, otherwise it damages the digestion. If everything is done in a good way, then everything useful in the stomach and intestines is split up and transported to the individual cells in the whole body, which take it up in split form, while the unusable is excreted as excrement, from the urinary tract as urine and the defecation from the gastrointestinal tract as feces, as quickly as possible. This is the normal process of metabolism. Through the metabolism, the body is also supplied with energy and heat, whereby body substance can also build up and thus grow, increase, or regenerate, as well as all body functions can be maintained running. One person can have a very fast and therefore not very effective metabolism, which causes him problems, however, to put on some healthy and necessary fat. This while other people suffer from a very cumbersome metabolism that leads to rapid weight gain and makes all efforts to lose weight an almost pointless undertaking. However, there are various methods of stimulating the metabolism and guiding it in the right direction in order to bring it back into a healthy equilibrium. That is to say, to improve or increase it depending on the initial situation. Below, I will mention a few rules that include important changes in diet and lifestyle. Everything is extremely easy to implement and can be easily integrated into everyday life, although the effects can sometimes be overwhelming. And in order to explain the whole clearly, I want to list the following. 1. If a performance is to be increased in a healthy way and in the short term, then the amino acid L-tyrosine can be used. This is a natural stimulant that can be taken, where but any other kind of similar remedies, such as psychotropic drugs, must not be administered to the body. If there is a need for an increase in performance, then the side-effectless remedy L-tyrosine can be used in a controlled manner to promote alertness and conscious vision. Tyrosine is a very good solution for this purpose because it is an amino acid that undoubtedly promotes mental performance, concentration, and conscious as well as mental and emotional fitness. Tyrosine can therefore be used without hesitation as a natural stimulant in times of high conscious and physical demands. 2. For a healthy metabolism, only pure spring water or filtered water should be drunk, because only pure water can fulfill the tasks in every cell to the fullest satisfaction. Only pure water enables the body to flush out all environmental toxins, metabolic toxins, residential toxins, and various other pollutants from the environment every day. Coffee and tea also contain the necessary water, but it should be used sparingly and more pure water should be drunk. Although the water requirement is fundamentally different depending on the person and cannot be generally stated with a certain quantity. For example, one person needs, in addition to water intake through food, perhaps only 2 to 6 deciliters of water per day, while another needs 1 liter or more. The daily amount of water also depends on your diet and lifestyle. The more unfavorable food and drinks a person consumes, the more the organism has to excrete the inadequate substances, which has an effect on the need for water. If only water is drunk and no or only a few dubious drinks such as soft drinks, coffee, juices, black tea, and alcohol, etc. are consumed, then half a liter or a liter of pure water per day can already work wonders. This, of course, always provided that a lot of water-containing food is also eaten. If, however, the usual diet of terrestrial people today is taken into consideration, consisting of extract flours, bakery products, ready meals, meat, strongly seasoned food in general, sweets, pasta, and sausage, etc., which contain very little or no water at all, then it is of course advisable to drink significantly more, but only as needed, which is effectively indicated by thirst. In any case, it is important that only the necessary water is drunk, because water is not overly necessary to really stimulate the metabolism. Since all the harmful substances absorbed from the environment and through food are one of the main causes of many malfunctions in the human organism and lead to many diseases, stimulating the metabolism to excrete and flush it out is one of the most important steps on the path to intensive health. 3. The metabolism can be stimulated and regulated much more easily and sustainably if smaller portions are eaten more frequently and lavish main meals are consumed less frequently. This stimulates the metabolism, especially with a calorie-reduced diet. However, if too many calories are consumed at once, the body tends to store them as fat. But if a person eats too few calories, the body switches to its hunger mode and stores carbohydrates as fat. So it is very important to find a good balance between food and calorie intake, which can best be regulated by careful food selection. Therefore, the various small meals and snacks should understandably not consist of ready-made soups, roasted and salted nuts, sandwiches and sweets, etc., but of fresh berries, tropical fruits, unsweetened fruit bars, vegetables, pumpkin seeds, poppy seeds, salads, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, and fruit, as well as other foods rich in vital substances. These foods are mainly alkaline and provide the body with an incredibly large amount of stimulating vital and mineral substances, which are very important for the metabolism. 4. The metabolism can and must also be stimulated by simple sporting activities. However, it must also be ensured that, with regard to the stimulation of the metabolism, particular importance is attached to the fact that, as a rule, slightly fewer calories are consumed than are needed for the actual immediate use. If a sporting or working activity is carried out, then the body, which must constantly burn calories as a result of the sporting or working activity, will make better use of the food consumed, which is why it is necessary to be physically active in one way or another every day. 5. The metabolism can also be stimulated with soluble dietary fibers, whereby a targeted selection of effectively good and correct foods can stimulate them particularly intensively. However, only foods with a high nutrient density should be selected. Accordingly, a food must have a higher nutrient density the higher its nutrient content and the lower its calorie content. If such foods are used, then the body will still be well prepared for a few calories is supplied. In addition, he is less stressed in the long run because he has to spend less time on processing than with low-nutrient foods, which usually have a high calorie content. Foods that contain a high proportion of soluble dietary fibers have a particularly stimulating effect on the metabolism. In contrast to low-fiber foods, high-fiber foods deliver significantly fewer calories at the same volume. The advantage is also that these foods are chewed more extensively and therefore eaten more deliberately and also reduce the feeling of hunger because the stomach is filled. In addition, this form of food is digested more slowly, which causes the blood sugar level to rise at a leisurely pace. The whole thing also causes a lasting saturation for a longer period of time, and in this way stimulates the metabolism in a highly effective way. It is important to know that insoluble fibers, such as cellulose from whole grains, are not capable of absorbing water, while soluble fibers bind large amounts of water and therefore swell in the gastrointestinal tract. These are the ones that ensure a smooth digestion and at the same time also cleanse the intestines so that nothing gets stuck in them and therefore no cinders can form. Soluble dietary fibers are extremely valuable for stimulating the metabolism. And if it is perhaps necessary for the body here and there, then valuable substances for stimulating the metabolism can be psyllium seeds or psyllium seed shells in particular, which should be taken daily in the morning on an empty stomach, as well as in the evening about an hour before dinner with sufficient pure water, whereby 1 tablespoon each is sufficient. In addition, a tablespoonful of mineral earth can be added to the body in the evening, which increases the cleansing power of flea seeds and regulates the metabolism, which also means that snacks are no longer necessary. 6. The metabolism can be stimulated with natural, high-quality biological cold-pressed coconut oil because this oil contains triglycerides, which are briefly simply called MCT and which are contained in nature only in very few oils. These fats are not absorbed by the body and are therefore not stored as fat. In addition, they also lower cholesterol levels and, in addition to stimulating the metabolism, supply the body with high-quality energy and promote the absorption of calcium and magnesium. It is also worth knowing that triglycerides are burned long before proteins, which is otherwise reserved only for carbohydrates. Coconut oil can be used very well and especially well for frying and cooking because it does not develop any harmful substances that are harmful to health. This is because it remains stable even in heat and stimulates the metabolism, while other oils that are treated industrially cannot do this and thus strain the organism. 7. A healthy diet is a vital necessity, which is why surplus alkaline and acid foods must be avoided and replaced by natural products, because an overly acidic body defends itself and reacts with complaints, which can be of many kinds. If acidosis occurs in the body, this means that there is an imbalance between the acidic and alkaline substances. If there is an overacidification, and this is not corrected in time, then considerable unpleasant effects arise in relation to the state of health. In fact, the acid-base balance is the factor that decides between well-being and illness. As a result, a whole range of health complaints occur, such as chronic bronchitis, diabetes, rheumatic diseases, gout, migraine, fatigue, osteoporosis, sleep disorders, or even states of depression and moral dejection, etc. If therapeutic measures against mild acidosis are necessary, they are usually very simple, and the person can carry them out without medical help. The only thing you need to do is to make sure that you do not eat an excessive amount of alkaline and acid, but a balanced diet, and that you exercise sufficiently. With a base-balanced diet, even temporary acid overloads can be quickly and naturally balanced and serious complaints and illnesses avoided. If there are too many bases in the organism, then there is a surplus of bases in the blood, which means that the pH value in the blood rises, which has to be calculated with approx. 7 values for terrestrial humans. If this value is exceeded, the so-called alkalosis develops, which causes anxiety, accelerated breathing, tingling, muscle cramps, and trembling in the hands. However, it must be said that alkalosis cannot only be caused by diet or the intake of base preparations, because if it occurs, its cause lies elsewhere, which is why a medical consultation is mandatory in such a case. In contrast to alkalosis, acidosis is caused by an excess of acid, whereby the pH value of the blood drops below 7 values. However, as with alkalosis, the pH value in the blood can be normal, but the values of the buffer systems are increased or decreased, which usually results in respiratory disorders. In severe cases, acidosis can lead to coma, but it leads to physical weakness and confusion, which of course means that it is important to seek medical attention. Far more frequent than a severe acidosis is a latent acidosis or a slight acidosis of the organism. In such a case, the acid content in the organism is too high and the buffer systems are at their limit, but the pH value of the blood is normal. If a high acid load on the body lasts for years, then it is a chronic latent acidosis, and over time, this constant overloading leads to health complaints and even severe physical suffering and damage. The correct pH value is very important for human health. The pH scale, according to earthly specifications, ranges from 0 to 14, with a pH value of 7 being neutral, while all values below 7 are acidic and all values above 7 are alkaline. In the body, it depends on the fact that in each range the suitable pH value is given. For example, the blood should have a different pH value than the large intestine. Again, the small intestine should have a different value. Consequently, the regulation of the pH values also belongs, in any case, to being healthy or to becoming healthy of the whole body or the whole organism. 8. Stress and worries must be avoided because they affect not only the nerves but also morale and mood. It is therefore necessary to prevent stress-related ailments and bad moods by eating the right foods, just as the body can also be supplied with certain useful food supplements to strengthen the nervous system. In addition, holistic measures are necessary to make people happy again and to counteract these diseases of civilization. These diseases of civilization, together with all sorts of physical organic diseases and ailments, are based on the causes of toxic environmental influences and false lifestyles that have replaced earlier epidemic infections such as cholera, plague, tuberculosis, etc. on Earth. Today, however, these hardly play a role anymore, whereas the many diseases of civilization are constantly increasing, which have been rising continuously for more than a century and infect more and more people, making them depressed, sick, and miserable, increasingly delusional and confused, up to the stage in which they rob themselves of their lives. 9. It is true that the human body or organism on Earth is increasingly confronted with toxic metals such as lead, cadmium, mercury, nickel, and palladium, etc., and in the worst case with radioactivity. All these substances burden and damage not only the immune system, but also the intestines, liver, kidneys, etc., and this happens because wide areas of Earth, the waters and the breathing air as well as the direct environment of men on Earth are impregnated by all the poisonous substances, and it is no longer possible for them to avoid them and to completely avoid contact with them. It is therefore important to make sure that as much of the food as possible is free from these toxins, which is unfortunately only possible by purpose-built food cultivation in one's own fields and gardens, if no artificial fertilizers and no toxins of any kind are used to thrive or protect the plants. Although there are also the so-called bio-products in this respect, unfortunately it is not always guaranteed that even with these, as with normal planting, they are free of any toxins that can damage health when consumed. So care must be taken to ensure that foods are used that contain no or as little as possible of any toxins that are artificially supplied to them. If these 9 rules for eating habits, food preparation and food production are observed and continuously implemented and integrated into everyday life, then after only a few days, the first successes and recognizable effects in terms of successful metabolic regulation will become apparent.
Thank you for your detailed explanation. What can be useful again for the one and other earthling? And when I listen to your words, I think that on Era you don't have all these problems regarding toxins in food, as is the case here on Earth. This is precisely because I think that you do not apply any poisons, and therefore no artificial fertilizers, pesticides, and pest poisons to your food, such as berries, fruits, vegetables, herbs, and fruit.
Exactly. This is the case because we only use natural substances that are purely vegetable and absolutely non-toxic for the environment, plants, and animals, and for humans in food cultivation and production. On the other hand, we also produce a great deal of food through multi-duplicators, as you once called these devices, whereby the basic material for this type of food production are the all-pervasive and immeasurable masses of electrons from which anything can be produced.
Aha, then this is also once clearly said.
But now it is time, Edouard, for us to end our conversation, for we must now turn to correction work together with Bernadette. This work still needs to be done so that I can go my own way, but I can always be reached via Florina or Enjana and come here when the need arises. I will also, as before, take the liberty of visiting you when my need arises, and that can be quick, because you are a very good conversational partner for me as a friend, not only in the way of open conversations that you call up and write down, but especially with regard to our private conversations.
Of course, whatever I'm happy about. In addition, interesting questions arise again and again, which we can discuss and clarify together. Be they from myself or because they arise from conversations with FIGU members or through other people, and then my personal interest is added.
Yes, and that's always interesting for me, too. But you have to make sure that you don't put direct questions to anybody, because as you know, I cannot get into it.
Yes, I know why I always only ask questions that are interesting for me personally. But let's go now, because it's time for correction work.